You've tuned in to the hashtag Lita podcast, where love is the answer. Before we get started today, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about my podcasting experience and encourage you to start one for yourself if you've been thinking about it. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. Yes, free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. You don't have to do a thing, and it can be heard on many different podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google. Finally, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Super easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, ANCHOR.FM.
You are listening to the hashtag Lita podcast, hosted by author, speaker, and coach Jeff Connor. He invites you each week as he has conversations to discover how others are using love to change the world. Listen in and find what inspires love within you, so you can go out and share it with the world. Remember, love is the answer.
I have a dream today.
Hello and welcome to the hashtag Lita podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this week. It's a beautiful, crisp fall morning. A little bit windy, but man, I'm looking out my back window at the woods in the backyard and just seeing some beautiful colors and just really enjoying this day. And so happy to be doing and being a part of this hashtag Lita podcast, this growing movement. I do want to tell you that our audience is growing. We're starting to get more word out there. We're getting some really great guests on the show, and it's just so much fun watching it kind of all come together and turn into something really cool where we're promoting love and kindness all over the world. If you haven't yet joined our movement beyond just listening, please do so. Go ahead and whichever platform you're using to listen to this, leave a review. Let people know what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? Rate the show. Let me know. Get a hold of me. Go to our website, subscribe, and you'll get the Take 5 Friday newsletter. That's a newsletter I put out on every Friday. It gives you a chance to just kind of take a break midday and get an introduction to the next week's guest, learn a little bit about some of the things I'm thinking about. I always try to include a quote in that and a little observation that I've made from that quote. Somehow it fits into my week, and then talk about some books that I'm reading, give you just a little bit of an insight into what I'm thinking about and what's going through my mind as that week progresses. And it's just a lot of fun. So if you'd be interested in that, head on over to the hashtag Lita podcast website, www.litaforlife.com. Subscribe, and I'll make sure you get that every Friday in your inbox. Well, we have another great guest this week, Ron Henderson, a.k.a. the Fitness King. He's an author, fitness innovator, and speaker who has been providing personal training and motivational presentations to audiences for the past 40 years. Ron was the first fitness professional in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area to work with clients and help them define, develop, and pursue their fitness goals as a personal trainer. Ron has been called upon to coach the top doctors, NFL players, lawyers, and CEOs throughout the state of Minnesota. His goal is to help people become the best version of themselves by providing them with training that builds their body, and through his motivational presentations that give them the mindset, attitude, and beliefs for success. I met Ron when I saw his vehicle outside a coffee shop, and I just had to go in and find out more about him, so I introduced myself. And from that very first chance encounter, which lasted well over an hour, I've enjoyed learning about Ron and being in his enthusiastic presence. Ron has a zeal for life that is pervasive and infectious. I asked Ron to come on the hashtag Lita podcast with me because he posted a video on Facebook recently about the current racial tensions that our nation is involved in. You know, I was really interested to hear his perspective as a black man on law enforcement, police officers, his friends as police officers, about his thoughts on following directions and following the law. We talk about that a little bit and break it down. And we just have a really fun and far-reaching conversation that touches on many different topics beyond that. So I hope you enjoy listening to Ron as much as I did. Enjoy. Ron, welcome to the hashtag Lita podcast.
Happy to be here, Jeff.
I am very happy to have you here. Thinking back, I was thinking about when you met. Do you remember how we met, Ron?
Yeah.
I
Yes,
saw
I do.
your vehicle wrapped car at a coffee shop in the little town where we live, and I can't even remember what compelled me, but I went inside and saw you in there and struck up a conversation, and we spent, I don't know, probably close to an hour that afternoon just talking and bantering back and forth a little bit, because your car said the Fitness King on it, if I remember right.
Yes, sir.
So the audience, lots of folks will want to know, and we'll get into, I think, a little bit more on the reasons why I invited you on the LEDA Love is the Answer podcast, but just kind of wanted you to introduce yourself a little bit and answer that $1 million question for the audience. What's love got to do with it? What are you doing, and how does love show up for you in your life and your work?
Well, love shows up to me by how I treat people every day, Jeff. I'm constantly loving on people. In fact, I had a meeting with somebody at Caribou the other day, and the drink that they made wasn't very good, and I didn't want to complain, but I knew it was wrong. I couldn't even drink it. So I went up, and there was a lady in line, and I said, "Oh, I didn't know you were here." She says, "Oh, go ahead. You're having a remake." I said, "No." She says, "No, go ahead, because they need to fix your drink." And so I said, "Okay, thank you." So when I got up there and I told the lady to please remake my drink, I said, just for being nice, I said, "Let me get your drink," right? She's an older lady. She kind of smiled. She says, "No, you don't have to do that." I says, "I know, but I love doing that for people." All right. And so I ordered her drink. I said, "And by the way," I said, "what's your perks number? Let's let you get credit on your they get the perks number for Caribou." She says, "Oh, you're so sweet." And I walked out, smile on my face. I said, "Have a blessed day." Went in a meeting with my friend. So I just really love loving on people. I think, like the song, what's the world needs now is love, and people need love. And I like to be at least one of the people out there that try to love on people. I don't hold things against people, and I just try to love on people, Jeff.
Yeah, and as I've watched you since we met, I follow you on social media, and frankly, that's the reason why I reached out to you and talked to you about being on this podcast, was because you recently did a video that you posted. I think it was a Facebook Live video you posted on Facebook, talking about some of what's been going on in terms of the riots around the race issue, the racism here in America and around the world, as well as the response and how people are treating the police. Can you just, I guess, give us a brief little synopsis of what you were saying on that Facebook video?
Well, I said, I don't know if I can give a synopsis, so to speak, because I said a lot of things actually on that video. It was probably 3 minutes longer, that video, than what I wanted to give, but I try to only do videos, Jeff, when I feel led to do them. And so I had a lot of people ask me actually they want to interview me for different things. They loved the video, and I think it's because it was heartfelt. See, my background, as a young man, I remember almost every single time I was out there, if the police would see me, whether walking or driving, Jeff, they would pull me over constantly. And I just felt like I was being harassed as a young black man. And I was raised in Fridley, friendly Fridley, by the way. That's a joke. Fridley was not friendly at the time. We were the only African-American family living in Fridley. So I got called the N-word every single day of my life, literally out there. If not that, blackie, spook, and different things like that.
To your face.
Well, yeah. I was like, that was before I knew how to handle myself. I think I was like 6th grade, 7th grade.
Who was saying these things?
Anybody out there driving by, there was, you got to understand something. Literally, there were no black people out there. I had no African-American friends till after about 9th grade. I met maybe one African-American person that wasn't a family member. I grew up in Fridley, so most of my friends were Caucasian. Now, here's the thing: when you're talking about, background, the reason I couldn't just make it so short, Jeff, is my background is one where you would think maybe being called names every single day of my life, I would have grown up with a racist attitude. But I didn't, because the people that were supporting me, sometimes physically fighting other people on my behalf, they were Caucasian. Okay. My best friends growing up were Caucasian. So I never judged, one race of people based on how somebody was treating me. And so when I went on Facebook, I went on because I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken, Jeff, because first of all the violence, all the rioting, all the looting, all the senseless killings, whether it's but there's a lot of black on black, murders in the Twin Cities and other places. And I was also saddened by the police brutality, misuse of force. But then I was also saddened by the fact of how people are treating police officers, because what they're doing is they're taking the bad cops that are out there and they're saying all cops are bad. Well, that's how they're treating them. Regardless of what they're saying, you get out of the car. If you're a cop, they're throwing bricks at you, they're throwing bottles at you. And some of my best friends were police officers, by the way. There's many people, former chief of police in St. Paul, Finney. I like that guy a lot. Riley Gilchrist, former African-American police man. Ronald Bender. I can just go on and name people that have been on the police department. There's a lot of them. My best friend, Dick Stahara, died last year. He was an officer. So when I see people treating officers that way, and they have a very, very hard job, that saddens me. We need to approach things differently, and we need to approach it from the standpoint of loving on people. You want to protest, and I think I mentioned that in the video, I'm all for that if it's peaceful. Against things where people are talking in such a way that promotes violence, even though they're not saying they advocate violence, they kind of promote it by saying, well, but when they do that, look what gets done, Jeff. Okay? Instead of saying, things can change, but we also want to remember that we never want to, do things that are against the law to achieve whatever the results that we want as a person or as a people.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, because I'm actually reading Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom book right now. Have you ever read that?
Nope.
Yeah, my dad gave it to me recently, and I'm fascinated to read it. One, because of what's going on here, and while we don't have necessarily apartheid, we've definitely got some things we need to get better at and do better with. So I'm reading it, to see what was going on in South Africa, understand what was going on there through apartheid. So that's been fascinating. I'm not very far into the book, only about 150 pages. And I also want to see, I'm really curious about how he used his time, because he spent 27 years, in prison as a political dissident, an activist. They threw him in jail for 27 years. I'm curious to learn how he used that time. But one of the things I'm in this part of the book where he's really become this activist over there, and how the laws in South Africa were actually set up so that they weren't allowed to peacefully protest. They weren't allowed to, go against the government over there. They had set up all the laws to kind of thwart, and they would ban these, he got banned several times from being able to be in large groups. I think groups of more than 2 people, or to speak publicly, and things like that. So they had to go outside of the law there. And I know that there was, I'm going to get into some parts where they moved away from a nonviolent approach to more of a violent approach. And even here in the States, I don't condone the violence, but part of me understands, or is trying to understand, because here we are, 50 years after, 60 years after, the height of kind of the Civil War movement and protests that were going on, I think, 50s, 60s, and even maybe into the 70s a little bit. And we're kind of, feels like we're back into that a little bit. Like we haven't moved as far as what I think a lot of people maybe thought we had. So I'm just curious,
if violence isn't the answer and working within the laws, one, if we don't agree with the laws, how do we start moving the dial and actually start changing these things without being violent or hateful towards each other?
Right. In hearing you talk about that, I mentioned the fact that I always encourage people, go on the police department. I mean, honestly, if there are more people on the police department, African-American or other people of nationalities that are there, when they see the kind of behavior that the one cop had that had his knee pressed up against, George Floyd, they can stop it. So I tell people, get involved in the system, become a councilman, become a mayor, become a police officer, a sheriff. Get involved in the system. So the more people to me, that's one way that you can actually help, because now you're a law enforcement officer that's right there. You're hands-on. You can be a witness. You can stop it. You can help stop the brutality. So that's one way. I tell people this all the time. Look at it. Whenever you've actually gotten angry at somebody, whenever you've gotten negative, that's what I call it. When you do things that you shouldn't do, that's a negative behavior. Nothing ever, in my opinion, is really anything good. Nothing comes out of it. But when you do things and you make sure that you obey the law, you stay positive. It doesn't matter how that other person, it's kind of like Michelle Obama talked about, when they go low, you go high. I've accomplished much more in my life, Jeff, by having a positive attitude. When I was younger and didn't understand things and didn't know what I know now, I would go off and I'd be angry, and sometimes I'd be angry for a week or two. Never benefited me. So I just tell people, do things legally, go down if you have to file it with internal affairs. And if you keep doing that, if more people keep filing, if more people keep protesting, if that's what they want to do and they feel that that's beneficial, do it peacefully. And I say that over time, things will change. But with that, Jeff, what I try to tell people is understand this. It takes time for change. Nothing happens overnight. But what you can change right now or work on changing is you. How you look at situations, how you let it affect you. So you may disagree with me, but I'm never going to be upset with you because you disagree with me, Jeff, because I respect your right to agree or disagree. So people, I think that's one thing that people can do is actually start working on themselves, saying, what areas can I improve in? What areas can I be the better example as a person, as a human being? What areas can I love on people? Instead of saying, I want people to treat me a certain way, start looking at how I want to be treated, Jeff, and project that outward and how you treat other people. So if I'm driving along and I see a cop that needs help, I'm going to stop in a heartbeat. I'm going to do that in a heartbeat because I care about everybody. So look for areas that you can help. Start volunteering more. There's so many organizations, Jeff, that they need role models for, especially for a lot of the inner city or black young kids, and even some of the middle age or younger type adult black males that didn't have a father in their life. Look at where you can volunteer. And for years, and I talked about this on the video, but for years, literally, nobody knew that I was going down to the juvenile center 3 times a month. Okay, it wasn't on the news because I didn't do it because I was trying to get exposure. I did it because I know that they need somebody speaking into their lives, Jeff, that cares about them. I didn't have a hidden agenda. There's nothing that I wanted from those people at all. So there's other ways that people can get in. And as you start being a mentor and as you start being a role model for what it means to conduct yourself a certain way, there will be less black kids shooting each other or shooting other people. There will be less violence. All right. Because a lot of this stuff is just kind of, they learn this as they're growing up. They see different things going on. And if you're not taught about integrity, and if you're not shown that through either your dad or an older adult or somebody that's a role model to you, you're not going to grow up and be the kind of person that you probably would like to be deep down inside.
Yeah. You were talking about your experience as about 12 years old, 6th grade, you said in
Right.
Fridley, and Fridley, it's not a, I don't know. Well, help me out, I guess, give a little context. when you were in sixth grade, when are we talking? Was that in the 70s?
Well, I'm 66, so that would have been like, I was in there from till 19, let me see, till 1969 I lived out there. I think 60, we had a house built in Fridley, and I think in 60, before the tornado, I think in 1963, we had a house built out there.
Okay. Well, first of all, I am blown away that you tell me you're 66, because having met you and seen you on TV, I would have never guessed that was your age.
Well, God is good, Jeff.
Yeah.
God is good.
Yes, he is, and been very good to you. Although I do know you've done a lot of that, and made the commitment to your personal health as well. And I think that has a lot to do with it too. So we're back in the 60s, the height of the civil rights movement. Fridley, I imagine, I know today it would not be considered an urban area or a rural area. It'd be very much, right there, kind of lumped into the Twin Cities, right? It's a very close suburb of of Minneapolis.
Right.
At that time, was it as well in the 60s, or what would have it been considered more urban back in that time period?
Well, no, it was just considered a suburb. I mean, we had a house built out there, and at that time, I mean, we lived. Our house was 2 houses away from the principal of Fridley Junior High. So for that kind of home back then, it was a nice home. So people were, some of the blacks would say we were Uncle Tom's or whatever, because we were living out in the suburbs. Okay, my dad had a new car eventually, and we had a new house built, but those small houses, like a small 3-bedroom. I mean, our house, I don't think I've ever had a house the smallest house that we had, and we had like 5 of us living in there. So, but it was considered suburban living. It was safe. You didn't have any problems with as far as there weren't burglaries happening and all that kind of stuff. It was a very safe neighborhood, kind of what they call little lower, not really lower, but kind of like middle class back then. So, but it was a nice, I mean, schooling was good, environment was good, but like I said, there was a lot of, I mean, I had some guys chasing me they were in a big truck, and they ran into the back of my car, my 60, that would have been a 68 Nova. They ran into it probably 5 times on the freeway, trying to run me off the road, yelling out names to me. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
So
it's so hard. I mean, I can't even imagine that. Myself, different times in a way, but I guess first of all, I'm curious, your mom and dad, where did they grow up? How'd they end up in Fridley?
My dad grew up basically Kansas City, Missouri. My dad got a teaching degree, and so he heard that, Minnesota, they're hiring a lot of teachers. And so we moved to Minnesota, and I think it took him somewhere between 5 to 7 years for somebody to hire him because of racism. He would apply for jobs where they were running ads back then in the paper, and they said, well, the position was already filled, only for him to see the ad still in the paper for 2 weeks afterwards.
Well, that must have been frustrating.
Oh, yeah. So he had 2 or 3 jobs. He was always he was doing janitorial work. He was working like in a nursing home. Then he worked at Fannie Farmer Candy. He did whatever he had to do legally to provide for the family. So excuse me, I learned a lot about work ethics, but I also learned the fact that my dad said that you have to work harder than Caucasian people, because they're not going to hire you. So some of those things kind of in my mind were instilled into me. And so that when I got older and I got a job working for a store in town, a small grocery chain that came to town from Denver, I remember, Jeff, putting in 60 hours a week there, but I only wrote down 40 on my time card because I wanted to show that I was working hard, because my dad said, we got to work harder. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I had another job for a big department store that's been around for years. We'll just call it the Bullseye store with the bullseye. Okay. Bullseye, like, Target.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the job that I did, I had the best record. I did better than any employees that they had for that job. And they said I wasn't promoted because I had to learn more about policy and procedure. And I said, well, can I have the book? I took the book home for like a month. I knew policy and procedure inside and out. Still wasn't promoted. But that's strictly because of racism. They weren't putting African Americans in charge. There was no African Americans in charge in that position in the store. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that growing up. But what I found that with all that stuff, and this is where I try to help, and I talk to you about that book that I'm writing, is I want people to start, what can they change in themselves? Again, like I said, it may take our lifetime before. I don't think racism will always be there. That's a part of the world that we live. We live in a fallen world, first of all. So it's always going to be there. And improvements take time, but what we can do is start working, improving ourselves. So when I'm driving around, I'm not driving around with the fear of a policeman at all. I don't even think about that. I don't think about racism when I go into a store. I don't. But I've done a lot of work with myself, Jeff.
Yeah. How do you get to that point? Because, I can hear what you're saying, the experiences of your dad and having watched him go through that, your direct experiences with racism growing up, working 60 hours and only putting down 40 so that you could show how much work you do. How do you keep yourself from being bitter, and not having that, just that bitterness toward people who you perceive are racist and holding you down?
Well, Jeff, you got to get my book to find that out. No, I'm teasing.
Well,
I'll let you know
I
what's
will.
out there.
Yeah.
I'll let you know. I talk a lot about, I tell people that it's no matter how free you think you are, so many people are mentally enslaved because they're hanging on to the past. And I call it like there's different chains of negativity. And so once you learn how to break those chains of negativity, now you're free. Because people that have those chains that haven't been broken, they don't know, they can't go to the right, they can't go to the left, they can't go forward, they can't go backwards. They're stuck in that position of where they internalize everything. Oh, me or my, that kind of like the what's the thing, Wizard of Oz. Oh, lions, tigers, and bears. Lions, tigers, and bears. There's threats everywhere because that's how they're looking at things. But when you tap into those things and look at and just go over it in your mind and say, you will always get more, you will always benefit more when you think positivity, Jeff, when you project positivity. So I deal with the mind, the body, and the words. What you say is so important, but then you must follow that up with action. So I have all this stuff and I talk about it. And once you go through this thing and then you recognize little things in your mind, they're triggers that will send people over the deep end, so to speak. You recognize these triggers. So when they pop up like that, and they're going to pop up, you do a system that I call catch and release. It has nothing to do about immigrants. It's a system that I call catch and release. So you recognize it, you catch it for what it is, Jeff. Okay, this is hurtful, but you say, I don't have to let that control me because I'm responsible for how I react to things. I'm responsible for how I feel. I haven't had a bad day. I couldn't tell you when. Literally, and that's not a lie. That's honest to God's truth. Now, I can tell you some bad things that have happened during my day, but it didn't create a bad day. There's a difference. Yeah. I catch it, recognize it for what it is, Jeff, then I teach people just kind of like blowing, like, let it go. You let it go. You don't get hung up on all those things that you can't change. I say, do not stress what you can't affect. And there's very few things that you can actually affect in life. So once you realize that, now it doesn't matter if somebody has a check. I had a guy that was going to give me, we had some business thing and it was a lot of money as a consultant because, I'm a speaker and I coach people. It was 12 grand. Okay. 12 grand in that would be in 2 months, in 2 months time, because it was every other week I'd get a check for $2,500 if they took out their taxes. And I was told that this wasn't going to happen originally. So now you're expecting that money. So how do you deal with it? I said, well, first of all, I said, relationship is more important to me than anything. If this is something that you can't do, don't do it. By all means, don't do it. And the person said, no, we can do it. But 2 or 3 days after that, I thought, is this person doing it because they made a commitment to hire me? Why are they actually doing it? And I said, I thought about this again a week later, and I said, I'm thinking, I don't think we should do this because I want to make sure it's right for you. And the guy told me, I knew you were thinking like that because you have so much integrity. This is what he's telling me. He says, my friend, we're good. I want to hire you to do this as a consultant for me. But I'm saying all that, Jeff, just to say this. If it hadn't happened, it wouldn't have mattered because things happen for a reason. So we can't get caught up and get emotional in things that we have no effect over, that we can't change it. But that's what most people do. They lose the count, or somebody gets the cell that they didn't get, and they get bitter and they get angry, and all that negative stuff, it affects you internally as well. It leads to disease, it leads to sickness, everything. So we have to learn just to catch and release. And as you practice what I'm talking about, week after week, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself, might even be 6 weeks from now, a week for, let's say not a week, 4 weeks from now, 2 months from now, all of a sudden you're finding out, literally, Jeff, every single day of your life can be a good day. Now, I didn't say that things won't happen that maybe you wish didn't happen, but you don't have to let it pull you down. Do you understand, Jeff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I am right there with you in terms of how our thoughts and the way we think, how they really will dictate kind of the story that we tell of our lives, you know.
Right. And here's the problem too, Jeff. Here's the problem. I talk to so many people some of these people are, they're professional, some are ministers, some of these people are in lead positions, and people say, yeah, I get it. I understand that. Here's the problem. Most people don't believe it enough to really put this in practice, because I see people literally that are angry that say they don't get angry. Okay. They're angry all the time. They say they're not worried about something, but they're telling me, well, I'm worried. I had a friend the other day, he said, I'm worried about what's going to happen for the winter. Business is doing really well right now, but he's worried. Well, how will business be in the wintertime? I said, my friend, don't worry about it. Things work out the way they're supposed to. First of all, you're making so much money right now. You should be banking for the winter. But don't get caught up in that. Don't let things stress. Don't let the things that you cannot change stress you out. Because if all of a sudden that I can't work right now, honestly, what would happen is now I have more time to finish this book that I would have liked to have had finished, let's say 4 months ago. There's always something that you can do with your time. There's a reason for everything. And as a person of faith, Jeff, I always go by that verse, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. So I always go back to the Bible and a lot of stuff that I teach even in my book, even though I'm not saying it's directly from the Bible, I've learned it from there. So I don't worry about things that I cannot change.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point. There is only so much that we can directly affect, and we lose sight of that so often. And
Exactly.
I think what we end up doing to our detriment and the detriment of others and detriment of relationships, just like, you know, that example you gave of the business, that guy who wasn't sure and you weren't sure how
Right.
it was going. So many of us would go into like a damage control mode and then try to influence in some way their decision to work in
Right.
our benefit.
Right.
And that I've found in my own life that the more I try to control what somebody else does, the more I end up losing.
I agree.
Things
I
don't work
agree.
out in the end the way you'd want them to. You end up ticking people off. You end up feeling bad about yourself. I mean, it's just not, I think when we try to overextend what our level of control and level of influence is, it leads to bad stuff.
I agree, Jeff. I agree 100%. And one of the things I talk about even in my book is I talk about, you know, loving people more than you love money. People are more valuable to me than money. It's the people. I care about people, and it just seems that life will work itself out. So you don't have to push anything. Do what you know. Do what you know to do. Don't worry about anything that you can't change. Things will take care of themselves. Now, the things that you can change, as an example. So I'm working on a product right now. I'm waiting for a couple more bids, and then I'll have my 3D image made. and then I'll take it from there, then look at how am I going to market this. So the things that I can change, I'm working on those things right now. All right. And if it's God's will that those things, come to fruition, so to speak, then there will be. But if it doesn't, I won't look at that and say, oh, wow, oh my God, Jeff, it didn't work out. No, I'll look at that and I'll say, you know what I like about this? I wanted to build this. I was led to build this. I built it. It's not about how many you sell. Sometimes it's just starting something and finishing it, because you learn about completing things, Jeff.
Yeah.
Too many times we start stuff that's never completed. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. That was a story of my life for a long time. We start doing something, we don't get the outcome that we hope we get, and so we quit doing it. I think sales, you mentioned sales and selling, a few minutes ago, and I think that's a great example of, we can set goals, outcomes that we'd like to achieve in sales. I'd like to sell, $30,000 worth of business this month.
Right. Yep.
The reality is, when you really start breaking it down, you can set that goal all you want, but you don't have any control over, direct control over whether you're going to hit that 30,000 or not, because you can't make somebody buy from you.
Exactly.
So then what do you have control of? As a sales rep, I have control of, how well do I know my product? How well am I educated on my product? How well am I educated on the art of selling and understanding how to sell? How good am I? How developed am I at my interpersonal skills and listening skills? These are all things that I can do as a salesperson to up my chances. And then, I can also pick up the phone and call people. And if I don't do that, I'm probably not going to make any sales. And not every one of them is going to buy from me. So I start learning, well, I need to make 100 calls in order to get, 20 appointments in order to get 10 sales, and each sale is worth so many dollars. And that's how you back into it. But when you just set a goal and your whole focus is on achieving that goal and not what you can control, I think you end up, that's when abandonment happens, because you are so focused on the outcome and not taking the steps that lead to that outcome. How many people, you're the fitness king. How many of your clients want to have a goal to lose weight or get in shape?
Yep.
They probably all do, right?
They all do, right.
How many of them, though, stay so focused on that and they never, your clients have, at least they've taken a step to hire you. They've done what they can do there, and then you help them decide or see what the other steps they can take. But if somebody has a goal to lose 20 pounds and they never get active or never change their diet, what's the likelihood they're ever going to achieve that?
I agree, because I'll see people that I talked to 40 years ago. I'll see them online, and I feel bad for them, because they're not 65 pounds overweight now. Now they're 200 pounds overweight, or they're 450 pounds overweight, right?
Yeah.
These are people that I didn't train, but these are people that I was loving on telling them why they have to do things right now, because this is what it's going to be like years later. And they didn't listen to me, right? And it's interesting, because when you're talking about, people, doing things, let me ask you this question, Jeff. If, generally speaking, if we meet a person and for some reason we feel like that person is just like us, like we're talking to somebody that's like our identical twin, is there a connection? Yes or no?
I would say yes.
Right. Okay. And so when we meet people, we feel like they're like-minded. There's an affinity towards that person, because they're like, hey, he's like me. Sarah, she's like me. Joe's like me. So one of the things I talk about in this book is, which does actually help increase people's sales and everything, is when you learn how to actually put yourself into their shoes, the way you treat that potential customer or client is totally different than what they're used to. There's a different fondness that they have to you, so they're more likely to do business with you because of the connection. So that's what I teach people, how to actually get that connection. And there's a genuine way to do it, because you're doing it really out of love for them, not what you're getting, Jeff.
Yeah.
I can keep getting back that. I've been in business for over 41 years now, coming up, or 41 years, because I love on people, because I have literally trained as many as 4 people or 5 people at one time that I wasn't getting paid because something happened and they lost their job. Well, you know what? You lost your job. but I'm not going to help you lose your health. I got your back because I care about you. And so when you show that you care about people more than you do about their money, you can retain people and you get a good reputation because people know that you really care. Make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As you said that, I thought about my own fitness journey, I guess, if you will. And I'm curious how this ties in, how you see it maybe tying in, because you talked a little bit about worry and don't worry about, the winter and things like that. One of the things, and I'm curious in your practice as, the fitness king, how do clients sometimes show up? Because I know for me, I've had periods in my life where, like, when my business was doing really poorly, I didn't want to do anything else. Like, to me, there was no point. I let how poorly my business was doing invade every other aspect of my life. And so I wouldn't work out. I wouldn't eat right. It's like, what's the point? I was maybe even in almost a depression, if you will. And then one day it just occurred to me, well, the next year is going to go by. Either way, my business is either going to do well or it's not going to do well. And I can be a really out of shape, business owner of a successful business, maybe an unsuccessful business. Maybe I've shut it down, but I can keep doing nothing and be really out of shape and really, not have a very good outlook on life. Or I can start doing some things every day that if my business fails, I'm still got my health.
Yep.
Another roadblock I see a lot of times, I fight it all the time with my thinking when I'm thinking about personal improvement. I'm approaching 50 and I start thinking, well, shoot, by the time I did that, I'm going to be, almost 60. What's the point? I hear those stories, by the time I finish law school, I'll be 40. And right. I just recognized one day that I'm going to turn 40, God willing, regardless. Do I want to be a lawyer in 40 or do I want to keep, doing what I'm doing at 40? Yep. Do you find that as a hurdle that you have to help people get over sometimes? Is that, I don't even know what you'd label that as, but just, maybe a limiting belief would be the best way to label it.
I got it. I say again, it deals with what I call the chains of negativity again. So when you're talking about, you said when your business was that way or whatever, you felt like the way it kind of pulled you down, like you didn't even feel like exercise. You didn't feel like doing this. You didn't feel like doing that. Okay. So, and that's a lot of that stuff is what the book is about, is to have people, you start looking at things differently. So first of all, your health, I used to tell people, you have that commercial, what's in your wallet? I said, what's in your health account? Okay. Not what's in your wallet. So your first priority, Jeff, always has to be your health. That's physical health, spiritual health, okay, mental health, financial. Financial shouldn't be the priority. If that's a priority, you're never going to be where you should be health-wise. In other words, it's going to be over that. So you may have more money in that physical, let's say that the financial portfolio, but in your health portfolio, you're going to be lacking. But if your health portfolio is high, it will always give you an opportunity to increase the financial portfolio because you're healthy. So you have to be healthy physically and healthy mentally. So you break those chains of negativity. That's what you deal with, the things with the mind, so that if the business is down, guess what? I'm not trying to be funny when I say this. Business is down, but guess what? Jeff Connor, he's up. He's up.
Yeah.
He's up. Okay. So it's a mental thing. It's not a game. I used to walk outside in the morning. When I went blind in my eye, I started feeling, just for a little bit, for about a day and a half, people saw me, I was walking, good posture, but inwardly, I was bent over. That was the one time I can remember in years. I was bent over a little bit inwardly, not outwardly, right? Inwardly, I was feeling like, I don't even feel like working out anymore, okay? I caught it, though. See, I caught it. Catch and release, I caught it. Now, I remember something that another speaker that I just really loved that passed away. He would always say this, and I have the nickname, the Proactivity King, and some people have heard it. But anyways, he would say, when you feel this way, go outside and scream out as loud as you can. I feel proactive. I feel proactive. 6 times. So I went outside and I screamed out, I feel proactive. And Jeff, you would not believe it, like supercharged my body. It supercharged my mind. It brought life to my body. And as I talk about it right now, see how the voice is changing, Jeff?
Yeah.
It's bringing that energy up. And here's the thing. I'm not making it up. Every single person that I've had, I said, go outside and do it as loud as you can outside. They tell me, they come back, they smile. They said, man, I got it. It changed me. So I did that. I feel proactive. I was out of that little day and a half. That's the only time I can remember feeling that way, slump. And I said, you know what? I'm blind in my right eye. I fell down at a health club, hit my head. Within 2 weeks, I was totally blind. And guess what I said? I'm blind in my right eye, but I can still see in my left eye.
Yeah.
Praise God. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I found out last year that I had prostate cancer, I'm in the living room with my wife. I said, watch it. I got to share something with you, dear. They told me that I probably have prostate cancer. I need to have a biopsy. I said, watch. Catch and release. And I just kind of breathed out. I said, let it go. I was totally fine with everything. I got a guy that I met. I prayed for him and his wife. I met him at the radiation place. He said I cheered him up because he was so down when he came in. I got to meet the doctors, the technicians, and every time I'd walk and I'd say, how you doing today? I'm doing all right. How you doing? I said, I'm doing great. And they kind of look at me like they didn't believe me. And it's like, I love it because it's all about your attitude. That's the one thing that you are in control of, really, is how you look at things, your perceptions and all that stuff. So if you want to look at the fact that now you don't have money coming in or something like that, if you want to allow that to affect you internally too, it can, but you don't have to. You can just say, okay, money isn't there, but I'm not going to worry about it because things happen for a reason. Trust God.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, as you're talking about that, Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, came to mind. Are you familiar with Viktor Frankl?
I've never read it. I have so many books. I'm going to be giving away a bunch of books in the next couple of weeks.
It's a really good one. It's a classic. It was written. Viktor Frankl was he was in a concentration camp during World War II. He was a Jewish German. I think he was from Germany and Jewish. So you know we all know how bad that went.
Oh yes.
And he was in the concentration camp. And his book, a lot of it, he was a psychologist. I'm not sure psychiatrist, but at the time when this all happened, and he wrote a lot of observations and ideas, and it was all about man's search for meaning. But one of his big things was just what you said. You know, the one thing they could never take away from me is my attitude, how I was willing to, or how I chose to think and feel inside. And I remember reading that and reading, you know, I read a lot, but it dawned on me one day that, number one, we were given no rules in life. Every rule that we have about life has been handed down by other people who didn't have rules for life. And what's the rule that says I have to feel a certain way about anything?
Yep.
Even when someone dies, who says I have to be sad about that?
Exactly.
There's no rule. There's no rule that says I can't laugh and feel joy, even in the midst of somebody close to me dying. And it's really about how do I choose to look at it. So if I've got this strong faith and a strong spiritual awareness and a relationship with God, for me, death isn't the end. And so I may be in one breath mourning the physical loss here on earth of somebody, and at the same time full of joy for where they're at now and what's going on and what's awaiting me at some point. And I think that just goes back, you know, money. You don't have money in your wallet, or you know, you get a job taken away, one of your eyes goes bad, you lose sight in that eye. Well, what are you going to focus on? Not having sight in one eye, or the fact that you have sight in the other eye?
Right. Exactly.
And you use it. So I'm curious, how did you get to this point? And I guess I want to go back, you know, we started talking a little bit about your dad. I'm curious about your mom, what her background was, and then what kind of an impact did they have on you as Ron Henderson at 66 years old?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It's almost like you read my mind, Jeff, on that. You talked about my mom, and right before you said that, you were talking about how people, when somebody passes away, coming up on the The 5th is when I got the call that's coming up, but September 5th when I got the call that mother passed away last year, my mother, okay, of September. And on the 15th, I actually did the funeral. I wrote everything up for the order of service. I preached it, sir. I did it all. I did it all for that. I put the
And this
video
is just
together.
a year ago?
A year ago, right.
Oh.
And so people always talk about people grieving and everything, and I get it. It's grieving is different for everybody, but my thing is, it was sad when I heard that my mom passed away. But here's the deal. I didn't consider that day being a bad day, though. My day was still great. It was. It was just a sad thing that she passed away, but she's a Christian. I know she's gone to heaven, and that's how I look at things. And I also know my mother would not want me to be down because of that. And when I pass away, I want everybody to celebrate. People just like I'm saying it right now. If I passed away, if something happened, I got hit by a car tomorrow, don't be sad over me, man. Be happy for me, honestly. And I want people to know that. Do not be sad about it. I'm a happy person. I've had a great life. There's some things that I haven't done that I would like to do in God's time, or as some of the Arab people say, inshallah, if God is willing, great. But it's how people want to deal with things. If you want to be depressed for 3 years to the point that, and some people are this way, that they can't even work the way they should work because they're down mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're sick all the time because they're so depressed that it opens up, the body to sickness and these kind of things. So, but I had to share that with you. But when you talk about my mother, my dad, my mother was always doing track and field events. She was in, there used to be a guy by the name of Robert Fusaro who passed away several years ago. He had a place called Midwest Karate downtown Minneapolis. That's Japanese. They rolled out our karate, Japanese style Shotogan. And he was downtown, but before he opened up his first studio, he was teaching my mother out of his basement, okay? So, and I don't talk about a lot. So early on, I was learning, martial arts really early on. I mean, really early on. And fencing, we were always fencing downstairs because my mother was a national champion for fencing 2 years.
Wow.
For that. She was hurdle, 440, 220, high jumper, pole vaulter, javelin. Then she started the masters events where she'd have people come all over up to Bethel College. Every year she'd have like people fly in for her tournaments for the masters, like over 60s or whatever.
Yeah. Where was your mom from?
My mother was from Iowa, Kansas.
Okay, so both your parents were from Kansas.
Yep, from Kansas, yep.
Okay.
And so she was always involved in physical sports. My dad was in the military, so he played, like baseball and stuff like that. But my dad was as a role model towards fitness and health that way. That was really mom-based because my dad was always working. And she had to take care of all the kids, 5 kids. So I learned most of that. The things that when you talk about the mind and those kind of things, I've been really fortunate to have people later on in my life that invested into me and I listened to them. Now, I wish I would have known what I know now when I was younger. My life would have been better because I literally, Jeff, when I was younger, I would sleep a lot because there's peace in sleep, sleep of death, some people call it when you're sleeping, because you don't know what's happening in the world. Nobody can bother me. Nobody can mistreat me. I'm in bed. I'm asleep. So I slept a lot, or I'd go out and I'd buy things. When I was unhappy, I'd go buy clothing or go buy stereo equipment or something. So my happiness was based on what was happening in my life. Now, because of where I am physically, spiritually, and really because God's in my life, I can do nothing. To me, what's enjoyable, meeting a brother for a cup of coffee and talking about what's going on in their life. That's where I have pleasure. I love sitting down with people, Jeff. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's not based on what's happening. I'm just happy. I can't help it. It's like, yeah. But I learned a lot just from people, and hopefully people hear this broadcast and maybe they'll learn something that it can change the direction of their life, Jeff.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a lot of good points about that. I'm much like you, I slept through a lot of my youth for the same reasons, to escape, I think probably more than anything. I had a very negative outlook on things. And it was, and it has been, certain people coming into my life, you know, and not just like you, I say all the time, I wish I would have known in my 20s what I learned in my 40s,
Right.
because I would be, and I pray my kids will listen to me, but they won't, you know, or they will what serves them at the time. And then
Yep.
they'll hit their 40s and say, man, I wish I would have listened more to dad, because we all got to go through that to a certain extent. But I
Yep.
think mentoring, finding people that, and being a mentor yourself, I think helps a lot of people as well. You know, the more you're willing to help your fellow man. I love Zig Ziglar's quote. He says, I'm absolutely convinced you can have anything you want in life if you'll just help enough other people get what they want.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so mentoring others to help them, I find, you know, when I look back at those times too, I wasn't real clear on what I wanted. And that was most of my angst. I wasn't clear about, I didn't do the internal work of who is Jeff? What does Jeff stand for? What are his values? And what does he really, really want? I mean, it's easy to say, I want $1 million. I want to be flying jet airplanes. And it dawned on me just the last few days that if I really, really wanted those things, I would have them in my life. The fact is that, and there are some people out there that really, really want those jet planes and those mansions, and that's important to them, and that's great. I think we need, and they go out and they find ways to bring value to the world to manifest that in their life. I haven't to this point, and it dawned on me that's because I have everything that I want, and I know that anything that I really, really want, I'll get. And so, and that's not about money. I'm just like you. For me, the most important thing is relationships and sitting
Right.
down, just like you and I are doing today. I mean, this feeds my soul, having these conversations, whether I get a dime from doing this or not. I know the dime's going to come from somewhere else. So I'm
Yep.
I'm really on board with everything you just said there.
I appreciate when you're talking about, you know, like you're talking about like people as far as learning it. I'm really happy, and this is what I tell people. You know, you can tell your kids all you want, you can talk about things, but they will always follow what you actually do. So I'm fortunate enough that my two middle sons, not my oldest son because he didn't live with me, the two Brandon and Majestic, they were around me enough, and they've heard enough of this stuff that it's rubbed off on them. So their attitude's different about things, and they catch it. If they find themselves maybe getting down a little bit, they catch it and let it go. And that makes me feel good, because they're going to have a better life than what I had as a young man, because they know more, Jeff,
Yeah.
you know, and they've been taught about integrity. I didn't have any integrity when I was younger, and I'll openly say it. I was really good at lying
Me too.
when I was young, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they want everybody to think, oh, they were so good. I have no problem talking about mistakes that I've made. And it's about, where can you help people? Where can you help people? And can I mention one thing about the book too, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have a title? Is this book done, or is it a work in progress?
I was going to start in a couple of weeks, letting people know if they can pre-order it, but it's probably 80% done. It's called Self-Staging: The Secret to Great Customer Service, A Black Man's Perspective.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to update. I'll make sure to update. So when you get this published and it's out there, make sure you let me know, because I'll add that to the show notes and put it out on social media and my email list. Because I'd love to
Different
drive
twist
it.
for customer service.
Yeah, it's a fascinating how you've combined all of those things. Is pretty cool. I'm excited to read it myself. But yeah, go ahead and you were going to introduce something.
I was just going to say, as far as self-staging it came from, I looked at all the years that I've been in business, and that's where it came out. How do you think we talked about racism in the beginning? I'm African American. There were no personal trainers in the 4-state area here until me. It was about 5 years later that people started doing personal training. Then eventually the gym started having personal trainers in their gym. Okay. So as an African American, I was able to do that and actually stay in business and do well. Well, I talk about those things, and there's secrets to it. It really is secret, because most people don't practice it. If they did, their business would be better. They wouldn't have to worry about their business, falling apart or whatever. So I put all those tools in there, and it deals, when you say self-staging, houses that are self-staged do better and they sell quicker. So when you self-stage the individual, that person that works for that corporation, the employer, the employee, when all those people work on self-staging themselves, they put themselves in a position that when that customer comes in, that customer's, if they got the money, okay, they're going to want to do business with those people because of the self-staging. And so I talk about all those things. So in the book and how to change where you're at. And then when you change individually, then you start changing corporately. Now all of a sudden it's got that whole band together where there's like a synergy to that. And when all your employees are fixated a certain way, they're coming into work, Jeff, they're happier, they're more content. And then when they leave work, every time I leave work, I get here at 5:30 every morning. I'm not grumpy when I come home. I'm not grumpy at all because of how I look at things in my life.
Yeah, that's the way to be, I think, to be able to look back at life and feel good about what you've done and where you're at, and to just have that base of joy and everything. It's
and I want to say this too, Jeff. I'm blessed that I'm able to do that, but it's because I've applied the stuff that I'm talking about. I wanted to say that so it doesn't come off like I'm trying to be cocky. I'm not. I'm just so thankful that I know what I know.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a great way to put it, because it's important that as we grow and develop and we age, I was just talking to my dad the other day, and I remarked, I get curious about how much of my personal development and growth is just a product of age, of getting older and therefore wiser, and how much is a product of the actual intent that I put behind learning and growing. And I think it's a little bit of both, but I think that intent and starting to understand, because you said something earlier that I really agreed with, and I think is at the crux of it held me back for years, is this notion that we can actually control what we think about. We may not be able to control our very first impulse and that very first thought that comes into our mind,
right, but you can catch it.
We can catch that, just like you say, and we can choose then to either hold on to it or release it. Yep. And I think what held me back for years was not believing that was true, not believing that I had control over what I think. And what I think, to a great extent, controls how I feel, and how I think and feel, that pretty much controls the behaviors.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so if you're full of just negative, half empty, pessimistic, thoughts, that's going to probably lead to those negative feelings, and you're going to be taking negative action, which, for you and I, when we talked about it, was sleeping in, drinking, overeating, shopping, all of these things that we do to kind of buffer those negative feelings because we don't like them. So I think the work you're doing, I'm excited to read your book. I can't wait to get on that. And I know we're right at the hour mark, Ron, and I know you've got a client coming in, so I want to make sure that you can get to them. As we're wrapping up, I'm just curious if there's anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or if there's something that you want to make sure the audience hears from you before we go.
Other than if somebody's looking for somebody for, I'm really not trying to increase my client load when it comes to personal training, because I have clients, that's what I do. But anybody, when things change, if they're looking for a speaker, if they're looking for coaching, because they want to be better at speaking publicly, I have things that can help people put that together quicker, because I watch a lot of people and I'll listen to people, and the problem is they don't really know what they're doing. And so I can help people be more comfortable on the stage by really helping them, because this is what I do. So,
well, I may reach out to you myself. I've said it a bunch of times, and I know I've said it on this, but I have a yellow sticky on my computer that says "Know ya knows," because I tend to say those, those crutch words, and ah.
Right. Oh yeah.
I'm not so bad at those, but ya knows has been one that I'm just really struggling with. So I might reach out to you. What's your website? How would somebody get in touch with you?
They can go to Ron Henderson, thefitnessking.com.
Ron Henderson, the Fitness King.
www.ronhendersonthefitnessking.com.
Cool. I'll make sure to put that.
Or they can just email me to ron@fitnessking.com. Yeah, and lastly, Jeff, I'll say this. Probably about I finally got my trademark 3 months ago, but I trademarked the slogan "Turn your when into now," because so many people talk, Jeff, about what they want to do, but it's all talk. And I say, turn your when into now. And I trademarked that because I want to encourage people to say, whatever it is that you're thinking about, turn that when into now. Do it.
Yeah,
Just do
I like
now.
it.
Don't wait.
I like it. On my desktop on my computer, I got Walt Disney, a picture of him with a quote that says, "The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing."
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Well, my friend, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and
appreciate your
hopefully we
time.
can do it again down the road. Catch up with you. Maybe let's stay in touch, because once your book is out, maybe that would be a great time to check in with each other and just have another conversation like this.
Sounds good, Jeff. You're doing great work. I love your program, and I will definitely post it too. But I love what you're doing. You're a great guy. You got a good heart, and you're doing some good things. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that encouragement. Thanks again, Ron, and you have a wonderful day.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Be blessed. Have a great day.
Bye
now.
Thanks for listening to the #LIDA podcast, hosted by Jeff Connor. We hope you are now inspired to say love is the answer. Now go out and change the world.
Tell me you want more for you and me.